I'm Ather Williams III, Senior Executive Vice President and Head of Strategy, Digital, and Innovation at Wells Fargo. Today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Barbara Hampton, CEO of Siemens USA. Barbara and I were recently on a panel together in New York at the Fast Company Innovation Festival discussing how large companies can innovate at speed and scale, straddling the line between trusted leader and innovative startup. As a leader in the technology industry, Barbara is no stranger to technology-led disruption. And the pace of disruption only seems to be increasing. And the size, scale, and characteristics of disruptors is constantly changing. It takes the form of technological adoption of business models, transformation, and all embedded within digital initiatives. At the same time, large enterprises are adopting technologies at scale and building new business models for the future, all while balancing across myriad stakeholders, regulators, and other complexities. We'll explore the pace of innovation at a time of rapid technology adoption, disruption, and business model innovation, and we'll explore what it means to lead with an eye on the future and the role of accountability while innovating at a breakneck pace. Barbara, great to see you again. Welcome.
Ather, it's great to be with you.
Thank you. When we were last together at Fast Company, we talked a lot about innovation. As the CEO, though, when you think about your role kind of driving innovation, I'm assuming it's mostly about capital allocation. So between financial capital and people, how do you think about balancing, the running the today's business versus investing in the future business, let alone disrupting yourself for the future?
It's kind of cool because I work for the Siemens Corporation, and Siemens has been innovating the future for 175 years. I love to say it would have been a garage startup if garages had been invented. Right? That's how old Siemens is. So focus in on the transformation of transportation, of the grid itself, and of buildings and industry, manufacturing. That's where Siemens is living each and every day. And with all of the innovation that's been happening in the fields of entertainment and the way we do retail and, all of those technologies can now be brought into this fixed infrastructure that we've been involved in. And so how do we innovate? It's really a matter of us being really close to customers, finding out what are the things that customers are troubled by, where are the issues, where are the opportunities, and then putting these people with deep domain knowledge together with them to start to work on ideas for how things could be done differently.
So here at Wells Fargo, we leverage a human-centered design process.
Yeah.
And we have an innovation center out in Menlo Park.
Yep.
And then we also go out and spend time on site with clients and do some interactions to understand the true problems they're trying to solve. So how do you and your team go about doing this, given the breadth of the industries you're involved in?
Yeah, it's actually a little bit different because I love what you've done. I've been so inspired by what Wells Fargo has done to just transform the experience. And you're dealing with millions of individuals. We're more of a business-to-business kind of company. And so the way we go about finding innovation and making changes, I think, is necessarily just a little bit different. Look for places where your traditional field meets new domains and ask, how could I bring value? I mean, you've done that in financial services. What we do is look for ways to say, hey, I'm an expert in how electricity flows at the edge of the grid, medium and low voltage. And right now, cars are getting electrified, and they're coming onto the grid. Are there things that we could do differently today that would, say, change the business model? And sure enough, what if cars were used as storage devices for electricity? Wouldn't that change the way we look at our vehicles? Well, what if by having a whole fleet of vehicles, you could provide large-scale storage of electricity, and you could sell your electricity from your fleet back to the grid when it's needed? Maybe you could even pay for your fleet that way. So new business models, new ways of living with technology, that's what's possible when we look at the edges.
That's really interesting. In a B2B context, how much time do you think about your immediate customer versus their downstream customer and sort of pulling through the whole system?
Love it. Great question. Because I think these days we do have to think about talk about it as a value equation. Mm-hmm. Who's delivering value to whom? And so something we're trying to do at Siemens is to create a platform that will enable more people to access our technologies, because the ability to deliver value in a platform economy, the equation changes dramatically. So, traditionally, we might have sold a piece of software or sold a piece of hardware to a manufacturer. Now we're thinking about, what's that manufacturer making? An example is the world of battery manufacturing. Okay, so the world of electric vehicles, now we're familiar with these. Now we know how important the batteries themselves are. And with legislation that's passed in the United States, we now have this motivation to manufacture in the U.S. for the U.S. market. Well, that means manufacturers need to stand up new operations. Well, it takes a whole ecosystem to bring together a new factory, to put new tools into those factories. And so one of the things we're doing is spending time bringing our software to the table to help people visualize what they're going to build. We call it a digital twin. Yep. And it turns out anyone in that value equation can use a digital twin. How cool to have one source of truth. Everyone can play with it and see, I'm bringing in a more sustainable supply into the construction of it. Or downstream, I'm going to put this to use in an environment that's going to have extreme conditions. Can I test out how it's going to perform? All of that made possible through technology.
That's fascinating. Oftentimes, I'm sure you get asked this question a lot, when we talk about innovation, we talk about disruption. And it always comes down to someone asks me, what technology are you most concerned about? Is it some form of artificial intelligence or distributed ledger or quantum computing or something? Mm-hmm. And I always say to them, well, it's not really the technology itself that's disruptive. It's the convergence of those technologies with new business models and ideas.
Bingo.
That are the disruption that we have to all think about.
Right.
And so that's what I heard you kind of articulate, was really thinking about your core business, the ecosystem in which you operate and your customers operate, and then the platform that you can build to power that ecosystem and enable people to build on it.
That's right.
Which is fabulous. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and you've clearly lived this. I mean, talk to me about how this translates into what you've been building at Wells Fargo.
So if you think about individuals, your personal financial life is a complex web of relationships, both with institutions. You may have a banking relationship here, a wealth management relationship there, a home loan somewhere else. But you also have your personal network, so your siblings, your parents, your children, if you have children or other dependents, charities you support. That's all part of your financial ecosystem. And we've been trying to help unpack what are the jobs people are trying to do with their money?
Yeah.
And then how do we enable that to happen? Banking's been on this weird journey where we've gone from hyper-local, pre-1980s, where it was local banking, then you had interstate banking, and now we went to a massive national to global platform,
right,
all based on products.
Yes.
And so now what digital technology is allowing us to do is come back and say, well, we can do that personalization, construct your ecosystem, help you manage it at scale. It's even more important when we cover clients like yourselves at Siemens. So when we think about large corporates, your entire supply chain from your customer's customer all the way down to your suppliers is one massive ecosystem that you have to manage. And so how can we provide you insights through that whole chain and provide services in value across it, whether it's financing, moving money, risk management services across the whole thing, and knit that together in the lens you can see. And so that's the things we've been thinking.
So that journey that you just described is, think of it as, we look at it as an S curve. What's the very first thing you do? You say, how can digital help me do what I do today? And then you say, oh, wait, how can I now, begin to expand the number of places I can use this? And then ultimately you get to that point where you say, wait a minute, the data itself is an asset. And now how does that let me introduce new business models? Mm-hmm. And the financial sector was one of the first to go through this adoption curve. Well, it turns out that sector by sector, everyone's getting on this curve. I knew something magical was happening when John Deere said, wait a minute, I have the ability to use data to manage agriculture in a way we've never seen before. So here we are. We're, as a partner, Siemens is helping customers transform their everyday in exactly this way. And where I predict we're headed as Siemens is to have our stakeholders, our shareholders, now start to demand, wait, what other segments? What other market sectors can you now address with these same tools? Moving from data collection to making sense out of the information to creating new business models that are going to unleash value that we've never been able to tap into before.
So the talent on your teams, both your leaders and then further down. So you need people who not only can run those 3 core businesses you talked about, but also think in this new way about how to leverage data, build platforms, extend technologies in new places.
That's right.
And completely reinvent themselves. We have this in banking where I have core SMEs who need to understand the guts of payment systems or lending relationships and credit monitoring, but I also need people who can build new digital experiences.
You've heard a lot of people talk about this as T-styled leadership versus I leadership. In I-styled leadership, you're deep in a domain and you have the expertise. In T-style leadership, you're willing and adept at looking side to side in your network to figure out, if I were to reach across, could we create something more powerful together? And what I'm really excited about in Siemens USA is we've recently come together as a leadership team, and the woman who heads smart infrastructure, call it an $8 billion business in the US, and the fellow who's building a business that's going to be that big for our digital industries, they've realized that all of our industrial customers have related needs. Yeah, inside the factory in digital industries, we need the software and the hardware. Siemens is #1 in the world in making factories run. But they also, because of sustainability, need to understand, how do I make my building envelope and the power that comes into it, make all of that sustainable? We need both. And our T-shaped leaders are the ones who are bringing the whole portfolio to a customer.
That's, wow. You're really making me think about that. So where do you find people? Like when you go out and you meet people, who do you look for? Like what kind of characteristics of leaders do you look for in your team?
Yeah, this is a really fun topic these days because, we're making a big deal about being more intentional about where we look for talent. Once upon a time, if you didn't have a degree in electrical engineering, then you didn't belong in the Siemens Corporation. Yeah. And what does that lead to? It leads to hiring people who have, chosen electrical engineering as a very young person, gone through college and graduated with the degrees, and you kind of wonder, why do we all look alike? Well, it's because of that sort of self-selection. What if those weren't the only skills we need in our corporation? And what we've discovered is, sure enough, there are people who've taken many different paths and who can now come to the corporation and add value in wonderful ways. So what I'm looking for now are the people, first of all, who have been engaged in technology, who aren't afraid of the digital tools of today. They've got to have an open mind. We refer to it all the time by its formal term, growth mindset, right? The idea that we are all becoming something new and different, and that we all get to help drive what we become. That growth mindset is so powerful. But let's talk about how you fit in as a leader in an organization. Bringing a backpack of technical skills is great, but what about the way you encourage others to bring their best to the office? So another of the big things we're focused on is empowerment. Leaders who can take their hands off the wheel and empower others to drive the car. That's, don't even get me started on autonomous vehicles. But what we're finding is that I'm seeing a very, very strong correlation in a lot of the data that we now gather. Some of our top performing businesses have the best safety records, the best quality records, the best on-time delivery records, and the best diversity records. How are these, cause and effect, I'm not sure, but today I see correlation.
I know for us, at least for me as a leader, I think about the first thing I look for are people who are intellectually curious.
Yeah.
Who are constantly thinking, to your point, growth mindset, want to not just grow, obviously, the business, but grow themselves.
Yes.
And they want to be that much better every other day.
Yes.
I think the other thing we've been grappling with is, in a company as large as Wells Fargo, where you have 240,000 people, a lot of have a lot of expertise, but and are hungry, but don't know how to make the transition from they've spent N number of years working a certain way with a certain very niche skill set. They can see the future of what's going to be required. How do they make that transition? So, and we as a company don't want to lose all the institutional history,
Right.
that connection with the client. So we're in this process of figuring out where do we need to import new talent for new ideas, new skills, new ways of working and thinking,
Right.
but also train and migrate people over to new roles, which is not an easy thing to do. You would think in a country as great as ours, where we have, such a history of education, that you'd be able to do that. And companies did that we can train people to do this job, but training people to take someone from being a teller to being a prompt engineer for, an AI chatbot, we haven't figured that one out yet. Have you encountered the same problem?
We are. And in fact, what we see a lot these days is people who are afraid of AI, right? And call it artificial intelligence, and there's plenty to be afraid of, but call it augmented intelligence, where technology is going to help elevate the role that the person plays, help them to accomplish more than they've ever done before. And it shouldn't be that scary. We have lots of jobs that involve things like data analysis or et cetera, where, man, with the new tools that are available to us today, people ought to be leaning in and getting excited about it. So what are we doing to help introduce people, maybe in a friendly way? Oh, gosh, any number of training programs. And this is the value of being a large organization. You and I both, we have the ability to rally the resources of our large organizations to really bring things to the entire workforce. And in our case, it's learning series that introduce employees to the power of the new digital tools, maybe take them through introductory sessions that can be self-paced. So, hey, don't be worried that there's going to be somebody looking over your shoulder and making sure you've done this. Grow at the rate you're able to. I love what you said earlier about curiosity and initiative, because what we actually sat down. A Siemens research arm is located in Princeton, New Jersey, not far from here. And we had access to some great academic leaders, and Rutgers and Princeton, and invited them over to the facility for a discussion about what are the implications of introducing these new tools, and what are the core skills that we need to be inculcating into our workforce. And I was expecting things like data science and computer programming and things like that. No, these experts in the fields of AI said curiosity and initiative. With those two characteristics, a person can learn anything. And we're entering an era of lifelong learning. And so, Ather, I think you're looking for the right kind of people.
That's great to hear. The initiative part takes it up another notch.
You've got to get up off the couch.
Yes.
It's one thing to learn about it. Now, what are you going to do with it? Take the initiative.
I love that. So one of the other things we've been talking about a lot as a leadership team is burnout. You can argue whether we're on the cusp of the fifth industrial revolution or not, depending on how you want to define it.
Right.
But when I think about leaders in companies, of the first couple industrial revolutions, they had decades to adapt to change. Like when electricity hit plants, or even, mainframe computers hit businesses, people had a long time to figure out the implications and adapt. Now we're in a cycle where, every 9 months there's a quantum leap in capabilities, and companies are popping up and folding in a very different manner.
Yeah.
And so just that pace of change sometimes can burn people out. How do you coach your teams to think about managing that, keeping their enthusiasm up, and they're encouraging them to take the initiative, but understand that they need a little time to cope?
Yes. And think about what we've all been through these last several years, right? So, we have, as a large industrial, that's the way we were known in the past. We had a vibrant environmental health and safety program. We're becoming a tech company. And the expectations are actually different. The needs of our employees are different. And I was really proud to see our environmental health and safety colleagues recognize the importance of mental well-being and actually put it on the board to say, you got to take care of this just the way you would your physical well-being, just the way we would our property, plant, and equipment, right? These minds are precious assets for the company, and let's take good care of them. So what we started doing is offering all kinds of support services. Our legal team invited me to be part of a wellness series that they had. Oh, wow. And they actually had a coach who came in virtually and took us through all kinds of techniques for whether it was dealing with stress or how to simply relax if you've gotten into a habitual stress. Incredibly valuable and well worth an hour spent once a month to delve into a new topic. Leaders across organizations like ours, I hope what they're doing is responding to the needs of their independent organizations and listening carefully to say, what do we need to be bringing in? But maybe the most important thing we did was a change in just the way we manage. I don't know if Wells Fargo does what we used to do, which is, hey, it's a new year, we've got to put a performance plan in place. Mid-year, we're going to have a conversation about that performance plan, and end of year, we're going to do a formal evaluation. Performance management theater. Because frankly, the pace of change is so fast that by the time we would get, frankly, even to the mid-year, we'd say, oh, was this the plan we wrote down? Things have changed. Wiped all that off the table and said, instead, we're going to have growth talks.
Oh.
Ather, why don't you and I get together frequently? And with my direct reports, everybody's on kind of a different cycle. Some people want to be in touch weekly. Other people, hey, let's touch bases monthly, right? But that ongoing conversation about where are you and what you're working on. And hey, are you finding it interesting and exciting? What's next? And as soon as you start engaging in that kind of conversation, what you discover is that there are ways to make certain jobs less boring because, there are a lot of things we do every day that someone else would love to take on. It'd be a new learning experience for them. And then there are things that you might want to add to your job because it's going to give you the chance to hone some new skill. Growth talks, highly recommend.
I love that concept. I'm going to have to take that back down to my team and implement that because you're right. The regimented performance cycle doesn't fit with the way things work today. Things change dynamically daily.
No, and by the way, if we're sending somebody the signal that I can predict what you need to be doing all year long, what are we saying about the pace of change in our business?
That's a really good point. So one final question to ask you. You mentioned John Deere earlier.
Yeah.
And so earlier this year, I had the chance to go to CES. And John Deere had some amazing technology on display. Some of their tools to fertilize fields, and they were using cameras to recognize the difference between a weed and a plant and apply the right pesticide or fertilizer depending on what it is. It was absolutely fascinating. So what companies do you look for inspiration? Do you say they've done it right or they're on the right path? No one stays there forever, but there's some who've done some fascinating things. What do you look to?
It's been so much fun to watch. But what I actually like watching is the startup world.
Okay.
I like watching the startup world because that's our early signal as to what are the problems the world is working on and what are the creative ways we can apply technology. So at CES, if you had come to the Siemens booth last year, did you? Okay, I'm going to reel you in for next time. And what we had, we decided to feature startups in our booth at CES. 80 acres, vertical farming.
Oh, okay.
The technology to grow plants precisely to specification is eye-watering. And so, hey, that's emerging. And we had, legislators thinking about the agriculture bills that are coming up, there to kind of see this, as well as large-scale food producers coming to the booth to say, hey, how could this transform the way I work? We had another innovator, Nemo's Garden. What about underwater gardening, where the conditions are almost always, the same, controlled? It might be the most perfect environment for growing plants. We had Space Perspective, Innovators who have said, I'm going to take a capsule big enough for you, 7 of your friends, and a bartender to lift you with a stadium-sized hydrogen balloon, a 2-hour flight up to the edge of space, a chance then to hover at the edge and enjoy the experience, and then gently come back down to Earth, space perspective. And we featured all of these as users of the technology that Siemens is introducing, this focused technology. I'm starting to refer to the individual pieces, cloud computing, AI, machine learning, the human interface. These are the amino acids of the digitalization of everything, and here we are connecting it all. I'm looking to the innovators for my inspiration.
That's very cool. So I should ask you one final question. So with all this energy and all your interests, what do you do for fun?
What do I do for fun?
Yeah,
I'm a grandma, and I've got 5 grandchildren. Last night, they read me a good night story because it's part of their readathon. But we were on the beach a couple weeks ago building sand cars and sharks and showing them the power of creating art with your hands. You name it, we're out there trying it.
That's awesome. Awesome. What are the ages?
8. All the way down to about 4 months right now.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
With 5, what kind of sports teams can I field?
You got a basketball team soon.
There we go.
You used to do doubles tennis at least.
There we go.
Excellent. That's it for this episode of Future Intersections. I'm Ather Williams III. Thank you for joining us today. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes where we will share advice and insights needed to stay one step ahead in today's ever-changing business landscape. If you really like this episode, please share with your peers and network. If you have a topic you'd like us to address or a guest you'd like to recommend, email us at futureintersections@wellsfargo.com. Future Intersections is produced by Wells Fargo.